Well, good morning and welcome. We have our interview this hour, and with such political and ideological differences regarding devolution, the divide seems to be widening and the push from all quarters intensifying. Well, in studio this morning, we have Mr. Njenga Mwangi, a lawyer and political analyst, to discuss the referendum as well as other issues in Kenya's current affairs landscape. Good morning, Mr. Mwangi Njenga. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning.
Now the push for a referendum by governors continues as Jubilee plans to oppose the move. So the referendum's really anchored on three issues: to strengthen the Senate, to facilitate the protection of devolution, to increase allocation to counties from 15% to 45%, and also the primary and secondary school infrastructure. What is your take on these issues that the referendum is anchored on?
Well, the first thing that we must admit is that the Constitution itself provides for the methods in which the country can amend the Constitution. There are certain chapters of the Constitution can only be amended through a referendum. That means we go back to the citizenry of this country and ask them for permission to amend the Constitution. There are other sections of the Constitution that can be amended by members of Parliament of the National Assembly by 2/3 majority. Now, this particular referendum, as articulated first by the Senate and the Governors Forum and by the CORD leadership, they're two different, because if you look at what was being articulated by the governors, the Senate was to increase the allocation from the minimum 15% provided by the Constitution to 45%. Also, they wanted to strengthen the Senate, which by the Constitution provides that the Senate will actually become the protector of devolution. And then we'll have to look at the powers of the Parliament. Parliament, described by our current Constitution as comprising the National Assembly and the Senate. It has been given different powers and different functions. The other issue about the referendum, as articulated by the leadership of CORD, is to change the presidential system from the presidential system of governance to a parliamentary system, which are two totally different systems that require different issues, different methods of governance, which means the Constitution will have to be amended extensively if we were to change the system from presidential to parliamentary. And because the Constitution provides that if you want to change the functions of the head of state and the presidency, you have to go to a referendum, because that's a radical change from what the Constitution has provided. Again, if you want to change the structures of as set out of devolution from the central government, Parliament, which includes the National Assembly and the Senate, again, you'll need to go for a referendum. Article 259 of the Constitution provides that. So we have to look at which one are we talking about. Then there is what is being proposed by the
Omkia Mutata.
Yes, Omkia Mutata. Yes.
M4M.
Yes, that's the March for the movement.
Yes.
Which basically talks about the amendment of Article 138 of the Constitution, which provides for the election of the president by universal suffrage, which means that every Kenyan voter who is registered gets involved in electing the president. They want to, as articulated by M4M, they want to change that so that we go to an electoral college, like it's practiced in the United States, whereby the counties becomes the units that elect the president. Of course, there are dangers in that, because as proposed by Omkia Mutata, is that you will have the 290 members of Parliament, the 47 senators, the 47 women representatives, and the 47 governors form an electoral college. And then, depending on how many votes, whoever wins the majority votes in a county, then he gets all the electoral votes from that county. Basically, it means if Kiambu County has got 12 elected members of Parliament, then if Kiambu voted, let's say, the majority, that's 10 out of the 12 constituencies voted for CORD, then CORD will take all the 12, irrespective of whether they only got, if they got 8 out of the 12, then all that will go to CORD or go to Jubilee. That is a fundamental change, and that is why, because we need a referendum would be necessary.
Where does this leave Wanjiku?
Let me say this, and this is my biggest fear, is that, of course, we've noted in the past motions being brought to Parliament, evidence being produced about malpractices in certain sectors, but because of the influence of the persons who are touched by the scandals, members of Parliament have been compromised.
Yeah.
It's much easier to compromise 431 people than to compromise 40, at least 12 million Kenyans. So my biggest fear is that it's much easier to corrupt them. And until we've gotten our country to a situation where we've drastically reduced corruption, I think Wanjiku's way, having the trump card to choose their president, is supreme. Again, the constitution, the current constitution, as opposed to the previous constitution, which had provided for the president to be elected by a simple majority. And we can go and look back at 1997. President Moi became president with only 38% of the vote. One of the things that made the current constitution so popular during the last referendum is that it provides that at least you must have 50 plus 1%, which means it's unlikely anybody can become president unless he garners votes from quite a substantial percentage of this country. If you look at the statistics, because again, this is where we'll have to come and discuss the Mutaingunyi's infamous tyranny of numbers. Statistics will tell you that the biggest community in here only enjoys 17% of the population of this country, which means for anybody to aspire to become president, even if you got 100% of his tribesmen, you can become president. You'll need at least 3 other communities. But is this where we want to lead this country? Where we just think about Tegi as a Mumeru, Jenga as a Mukikuyu, Anita as a Lu? That's not what we want our children. We can transcend that, and that is what we should be advocating to this country. Let me come to the other issue about strengthening the Senate. The truth of the matter is, as provided in this constitution, literally, if you interpreted the constitution liberally, to me, the National Assembly has been given more powers than the Senate.
No, they did it deliberately.
Yeah?
They did it deliberately.
Exactly. Exactly. Again, we have to look at this constitution. This constitution is not perfect. It was negotiated over a long period of time. In fact, as way back as when I was in the university in the early 80s, we were agitating for constitutional reforms, which we have gotten after 25 years. Immediately we've gotten that, I think it is not proper to subject Kenyans to a referendum at this moment. What we need to do, for example, we want the increase in the allocation of the budget to the counties. The constitution only provides the minimum, which is 15%, which means the central government must give a minimum 15%. But let's look at what has happened so far. The current government has allocated 32%. Okay?
Some people dispute that. They say it's not. It is not 32%. It's actually 18%.
I really wouldn't go to the facts because I'm not in treasury and I've not looked at the figures. But I think what they have done is that they've looked at the last budget, not the current budget. They'll have to look at the figures that were there in the previous financial year to arrive at. But this is something also that can be, as provided in the Constitution, we have the Commission for Revenue Allocation. Then we have the Forum for the Governors and the Senate. That group, that is the senators, the governors, and the commission, and the chairmanship of the deputy president, can discuss and increase that provision. You don't need to go to a referendum just to increase that provision. It is not worth it. For example,
so there are other avenues to achieve the aspirations of devolution.
Exactly. The other thing is, we really need to give each other's time. You can't say that devolution has failed 4 months after the last elections. We'll wait at least 1 year. See, has the 210 billion that has been provided for the counties, has it been transferred?
So your view that this the timing of the calls for the referendum is maybe a little bit premature? Is that your view?
I think it is very premature. And if you look back, we had a referendum in 2005. Yeah. Then in 2007, we went for general elections, which really divided this country. So let's be honest about it. It's made the leadership of this country be subjected to trials outside this country. etc. That's 2008, 2007. Then 2010, we had a referendum. 2013, we had elections. Then we want to subject this country to 5 elections in a period of 10 years? Can we afford it?
That was something else I was going to ask you, is obviously the cost of a referendum. It's not cheap. I mean,
I think the minimum that you could count about the referendum, it is not going to cost anything less than about 60 billion Kenyan shillings.
How would this be
And it's
financed?
not just about the money. 60 billion is a huge percentage of the total budget that goes. I would rather somebody is taking this money, let it be allocated to the counties, than it to be wasted and in the referendum. And the referendum is not just about the financial cost. Think about the man hours that is spent during campaigns.
Yeah.
Think about the thousands, hundreds of thousands of Kenyans who we take from their economic activities to go and attend campaigns. That is a drain to the little that we have here. So my take will be, we've gone to an election. 5 years is a very short period of time. It's such a short period of time. Just the other day, my daughter was in kindergarten. Now she's a graduate from the university. It's such a short period of time. I think we should give Jubilee the benefit of doubt. If mid-term they are not doing anything, then we could be agitating to get them out during the next elections. We should also learn how to accept defeat. The classic example is what happened to Mali last week. So last week, the loser actually called the president and actually went with his wife to the president to say, we concede defeat.
But you don't have to go there because Uhuru did it.
Yes.
When he was defeated
exactly.
by Kibaki.
When Uhuru lost in 2002, at Serena, they conceded defeat. This is something that we should learn to do. And if we love this country, if we are patriotic about wanting to genuine change in this country, we must give others a chance. And we don't demonize people because of, I never chose to be born a Kikuyu. Mutegi. And I can actually tell you, as a pastor, I've not received any additional benefit, either as a lawyer or as a farmer or as a business person, simply because of my community. And that's why we have friends everywhere. If you ask me about some of my best friends, are Luos, are Kalenjins, are Luyas. The best, my daughter's best friend, my youngest daughter's best friend, she's a Kalenjin. And that happened even irrespective of what has happened in the past. So let's learn. This constitution is very young. Let's first of all implement it. Then if things need to be changed, the American Constitution is to be still being changed how many years? 200 years thereafter. The issue about the counties forming the electoral college, we'll have some really difficult things to do with that. If you read the Kriegler report, that is the commission that investigated why elections, the fraud elections of 2007, that commission, one of its recommendations was that Kenya practice democracy that is not understood anywhere else in the world. It says that the weight of the vote, for example, then we had Lamu East, which had a voting population of 9 9,000. Then we had Bakassi that had a voting population of 250,000. According to Kleigler, the weight of the vote in Lamu was 13 times heavier than the one of Embakasi. That has not really been done nicely because, first of all, in the same constitution, Parliament, or the people who are discussing it, decided to retain all the previous 210 constituencies, irrespective of the numbers. Kleigler had recommended that the variation in population density between constituencies should not be more than 5%. Our constitution, as it is today, provides for 40% deviation in population quota in urban and sparsely populated area, and a deviation of 30%. Now, that will need, at one point in our lives, after we have implemented the constitution, we'll have to look at that deviation between the populations in different constituencies. Now, let us come to the 47 counties. There's absolutely no rationale of how the colonial system created the 42. First of all, there were 42 counties, and during President Moi's term, he increased it by another five counties. It's one of them like Vihiga, etc. There is no logic in how those counties were created, so that you come and find Kiambu County with almost 1 million voters. You go to Lamu County and you find it has about 200,000 voters. Can you see the disparity there again, that the senator of Lamu represents 200,000 people, the senator for Kiambu represents 800,000 people. There is a problem. So, but since this constitution is not perfect, we will take time. The American Constitution is being still amended 200 years thereafter. But we should first of all make sure that the institutions created by this constitution are grown to maturity. We have seen the judiciary is getting into its feet after, literally speaking, it had gone to the dungeons. It's getting to its feet. You go, you will find there was no provision of Parliament being involved in budgetary making in this country. Now Parliament has a role in budgetary in making the architecture of the budget. Then there is one thing that the Kenyan citizens must know, is that this constitution provides for citizen participation. And that is one of the things that we don't do. We let things become bad, we are allowed to participate. Parliament should never pass a bill without first of all getting the views of the citizen. But are we doing that? We are not. So my plea to Kenyans is that we should be perpetually vigilant and make sure that we will make the loudest noise if the government deviates from this constitution. Before it does that, my take is that let's give time for this government to implement this.
You have been involved in the ICC?
Yes.
As a lawyer for the victims?
Yes.
What do you see the case going on as we stand today? What's your take on this?
It's an institution that I honestly had a lot of respect for. And because when the ICC statute was being enacted in 1998 in Rome, it was to bring out the end to impunity. Because this world has suffered great injustices. We can go straight from the First World War, when after German attacked other countries and there was war, a lot of people died. There were certain trials that were formed after the creation of the League of Nations, which afterwards became the United Nations. After the Second World War, we had the Nuremberg and the Tokyo trials that tried those people who were the biggest, who took the greatest responsibility in the Second World War. When in Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia, there was uprising and we found leaders killing their people en masse. the United Nations formed the International Criminal Tribunal for Yugoslavia. When the genocide happened in Rwanda, we created the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. Now, the ICC statutes wanted, instead of us having those ad hoc international trials, then we have one body that will literally check that leaders don't use the power to create mayhem and kill their own citizenry. Of course, if you look at how the West has behaved over the centuries, in Uganda we had Idi Amin, we had Mobutu Sese Seko in Congo. We had the other gentleman, what was his name? The gentleman from CLA, Central African Republic. Was it Bongo? Bongo. Yeah. Yes. People who killed, but because that time we had the East-West divide during the Cold War, the Americans were ready to support Mobutu, irrespective of what the killings going on in Kinshasa and the other areas. As long as he supported, he did not go to the West. Now, the ICC, as constituted, again, it's still a very young institution, Mutegi. It started operations in 2002. We are 2013. It's only 11 years old. It will grow also as an institution. The African continent has looked at it like it is there to propagate neocolonialism against Africa on the basis that all the people who are being prosecuted there are of all crimes against humanity, war crimes, are from the African continent. We haven't seen anybody being charged with what has happened in Palestine, for example. If you looked at the state of Israel, the atrocities has committed in the West Bank and the Gaza region, crimes against humanity have been committed. If what happened in Afghanistan and in Iraq, crimes against humanity and war crimes have been committed. That the prosecutor has not found it prudent to investigate any one of those, then from the African point of view is that why only Africa?
But maybe you could clarify this. Yes. If a Western, let's just say United States, would a president actually have the mandate to be called to the ICC?
No, first of all, the American, the USA was a signatory to the Rome Statute during the period of Clinton. Then when George Bush came into power, he unsigned that. And they actually passed an act of parliament in Congress that states that if an American is taken to The Hague, the American government has the right to go to The Hague and literally use military force to extract the American being tried there. And that is not America still. Russia is not a signatory. China is not a signatory.
So that might be the argument for the disparity between some nations being accountable to the ICC and others perhaps not.
Yes, and I think the other thing is that the misnomer we have again is about the Security Council of the United Nations. Yeah, we have 5 permanent members who are the United States, we have Russia, we have Great Britain, France, and what is the 5th one?
China.
And China. Germany and Japan, which are also superpowers, but because they were the aggressors during the Second World War, are not part of the Security Council of the United Nations. That Security Council is the one that is mandated to direct the prosecutor at the ICC to investigate certain situations. And if the Security Council, any one of the 5 permanent members, if he vetoes a decision like that, there will never be investigations. That's why you'll never find the prosecutor going to investigate anything done by Britain, China, Russia, or the USA, because they have veto power. Maybe that is another thing that we will need to relook at the structure of United Nations. The equality of states must be restored so that you don't have the 5 having more say in what goes on in the ICC than the rest of the...
So you think Africa Union is a point in trying to move out and then get out of the ICC?
First of all, I think the African Union, what it should do is, first of all, establish that the African Court of Justice has the mechanism in place to prosecute people who commit crimes that are anticipated by the Rome Statute. That is a must, because, again, Africa being the last continent where the colonialism got out, of course, they are younger nations, and we have problems of governance that we will need to have. But what I'm trying to say is that we have local mechanisms here that work. Look at our judiciary, for example, and not even now. 2002 or 7 to 8, when we had the fracas, and we said that we don't have faith in the judiciary. And that is why we went to the streets. If you look at the timetable of the High Court of Kenya relating to election petitions, it went on. And members of parliament like Mogwa of Kamukunji was thrown out. There was Aveka from Makadara was thrown out by the High Court. So, again, those institutions had problems, but they had not totally collapsed. Why the International Criminal Court for Rwanda was created was that after the genocide, all the institutions had collapsed. The judiciary had collapsed, the police had collapsed. So there was nobody who would investigate, and that is why the international community, through the Security Council, formed the International Criminal Court for Rwanda. Can we say the same is true about Kenya? It was not even true about Sierra Leone after the war. Sierra Leone negotiated with the United Nations to form the International Criminal Court for Sierra Leone, the one that tried terror at The Hague, but all the other people are being tried in Freetown. My biggest problem was the last parliament, that when you had the opportunity to create a local tribunal, which had been recommended by the Working Commission, because of literally ignorance, they rejected that, because what is happening, we should not have happened. But we had lack of foresight.
So what do you think will happen to Uhuru and Ruto, in your view?
My view, as having represented victims require justice. And people who are still in tens, or people who had millions of shillings of their properties destroyed, this government ought, first of all, compensate them. Not by the 35,000 shillings they were being given, no. If you lost 1 million shillings because the government failed in its primary obligation to give you security, that government is liable to fully compensate you. So I would start from the premise that for the victims to get justice, this government must commit itself to fully compensate them and resettle them. The other thing is that we need to have to create also equip the Director of Public Prosecution with enough resources to investigate what happened. The truth of the matter is that the case as it is in The Hague, I have no doubt in my mind those cases will collapse, because everybody who has looked at the evidence as presented so far by the prosecutor, he relied heavily on reports by international NGOs. This is Human Rights Watch, what's the report of the Kenya National Human Rights Commission, the report by the Kenya Human Rights Commission, and other NGOs. He heavily relied on that. And during the pre-trial stage at The Hague, in both the Ruto and Uhuru's cases, you could see that the prosecutor actually did not even understand the basic workings of the Kenyan government. One particular question that came is that, if you remember, is when Ocampo asked Uhuru on cross-examination that during the period in question, you are the Minister for Local Government. Then you must have been in charge of the local police. If he understood, Kenya police has never been, we never have had constabularies. Yeah. He would have known that the Kenya police, we had two police, under two different, we had the Kenyan, the regular police, and we had the administration police. The Minister of Local Government had absolutely nothing to do with that. So when we go back to that, you will see that the basic things you should have investigated as to knowing who was in charge of what. He did not have that. So the popular belief is that the cases will collapse, but...
and suppose in the most unlikely event that they do not collapse, and we have the president and the deputy president into the coolers.
Of course, that definitely what happens is that the Constitution provides about the Speaker of the National Assembly assuming power, and then within a period of 90 days, we must go to the elections. That is, in the unlikely event, it happens. But I think this Constitution does not anticipate any point when we can have a power vacuum. Whether the president and the deputy president are not there. Military is not there, the Speaker of the National Assembly assumes power, 90 days there, we have elections and we have a new president.
All right, well, thank you. I think that's really cleared up a lot of misconceptions around the whole ICC and the procedures that will follow. Unfortunately, we are out of time, so I want to thank you very much for coming to studio. It's been very insightful having you here, and we hope to have you here again in future. Thank you very much, Mr. Mwangi.
You're welcome.
All right, well, that wraps up our interview for this hour. We're taking a little break, and we will be back shortly.